Hey YouTube, Awesome Rider here. Welcome to my review for Kamen Rider Revice Episode 9. So this episode was kind of all about dealing with the aftermath of last week's big reveal to the characters about Daiki and his demon, and kind of delving into Daiki and Kaguro's motivations, more so for the characters than the audience. Like, I think from watching the show, all the audience knew why this happened to Daiki and what his motivations are. So it's not really a huge surprise, and it's kind of just almost reiterating stuff to us. But it was more about letting the characters in the show know and deal with it. And I think it was good. I don't think it was unnecessary. I don't mean to say that, like, oh, we didn't need to know it. But I think that if you have basic, critical thinking skills, you understood Daiji's motivations. But this was more about solidifying it for his arc and letting the characters know that weren't in the know, including Daiki himself. Because you kind of have everybody going through a debate in this episode. Like, you have the family dealing with what's going on and figuring out how to deal with it. I'm going to the scientist guy, and he's like, well, did you know? He's like, of course I didn't. And he gives them the Mantis stamp, and there's basically a debate about throughout the episode of, like, what do we do with him? Because Demon's like, we have to kill him. And Daiji, of course, is like, it's my brother, I can't. And that's a little boring to me just because I've seen that so many times, but obviously it makes sense that they have to do that storyline. But then there's also a nice scene with Iki and his sister, where he says, like, you're the most gossipy guy in town, basically. Like, where's the busybody Iki that's always in everybody's business and knows what's going on and kind of has, like, an intuition about what people's problems are? As we've seen, I think, in a couple of the stories of the week, is he kind of has an intuition when something's up and helping people solve their problems. And obviously he had a blind spot here for his brother where he didn't really know what was going on with him. And his sister kind of inspires him to think, what's going on with Daiji? You can solve this. There's also a scene with his parents where they're like, we have to save him, you can. Just like the time that you saved him in hide and seek. They mentioned something about how the reason Daiji was staying in place during hide and seek because he was scared. And Iki says, oh, is that why? I feel they paid special attention to that for a reason. I'm going to assume / maybe hope that's why it comes back. Because otherwise I found that funny. Because I'm like, I feel like these situations are entirely different. Like, yeah, you can totally save him from being possessed by a demon. Remember when you found him from hide and seek? I thought that was funny, but I think they drew enough attention to that scared thing that it's going to come back around. I don't think it was just for the sake of it. But regardless, there was lots of nice scenes within that, even if I'm a little bit over that whole debate of like, oh, we have to kill him, but no, he's insert family member name here. But I thought there were some good scenes about the debate of what to do with Daiji, and it kind of got Iki to think about it, which obviously culminated in the end when Kaguru is telling him, like, yeah, the reason I was born is because your brother done hate your ass. It was kind of a shocking realization for him. I think he's going to probably have one of those moments where he sort of looks back on things and realizes it, but it's kind of a lot about setting up Iki to recognize what's going on with his own brother. And also Daiji to recognize what's going on with himself, because there's another internal conversation where he's like, why is this happening to me? Who are you? I'm like, oh, yeah. Don't you see the hat? It's Mrs. Nesbit. No, obviously, idiot, it's a demon. You know what the demons are, but he talks about, like, oh, what are you? And he also describes to Daiji, like, I'm your inner demon that's been building from the resentment towards your brother. And he's like, that's not true. It's impossible. Basically explains that it's been building up ever since he was little. And you basically have the same version of that scene with him talking to Daiji and him talking to Iki later. But like I said, it solidifies the motivation. And he's also, like, recruiting Deadmans for the Deadmans this week. And he recruits these 3, like, phone scammers. And every time he's in a scene with them, it has the lighting of a Saw movie for some reason. But he uses the Brachio monster of the week. And we get the debut of the Mantis Gaim form. Like I said, the professor gives, or the scientist gives him the Mantis form, which is Gaim. And it's another good form. I have a soft spot for it because Gaim's one of my favorite series and favorite rider forms. And I think it's another really cool suit design. I like the little bow that's based off the Sonic Arrow. I will say it's a little bit less subtle. Not that, like, Gorilla Kong was subtle, but last week I talked, or not Gorilla Kong, Kong Forze was subtle, but like I talked about last week's review, that one really blended together the aesthetics of a gorilla and the Forze bulkiness well. The Gaim one, while I think it looks good, I think is one of the most in-your-face, clearly is Gaim, although they do clever things, I think, with the Mantis design, with, like, the angles of the helmet, but not that it's like an, oh, I hate this because it's really obvious, but I think it's one of the more obvious ones, even if I like it. Actually, my biggest complaint about the Gaim form is I felt it was one of the most shoehorned in. Like, we unfortunately always go really fast with the ability forms, which is one of my biggest pet peeves in Rider in general in recent years. But we've been doing that in Revice, but it hasn't been a huge deal. This one has felt more shoehorned in, though, just because it didn't really amount to anything. Like, he used it against the monster at first, and then he didn't win because he used it in the first battle, and I'm like, is that it? That's all we're going to use it for? And then he used it in the battle with Daiji, and I'm like, oh, okay. But then he got kicked out of it. So we know this is already going to be quick, guys, but at least make the form seem like it had a valuable reason to debut. We also get to see Demon's powers working a little differently. Like, he doesn't get a form change, but when he uses one, it creates like an armament weapon, kind of like Birth creates like this mole drill, which was fine. We just kind of end off with Revice about to Rider kick Daiki. And that's the cliffhanger, again, before our hiatus. Both Sentai and Rider ended on a cliffhanger for the hiatus, which I think, again, is frustrating, but as I mentioned, I think that's kind of a good thing because it gets people thinking about it and wanting to see what happens next so they don't forget that it's coming back. But I thought this was a solid episode. I would give it a 3 out of 5. I don't think it was, like, awful or anything, but it was kind of your, like, in-between episode. I think a necessary one, as I liked it, that it dealt with the aftermath of last week, while simultaneously positioning us for like Live's debut next week and the next significant part. And I like that we didn't just, immediately go plot point, plot point, plot point, plot point. This was kind of an episode like, yeah, sure, we had the debut stuff, but it kind of felt like an episode where we took a little bit time to breathe within the plot. But what did you guys think of this week's episode? Let me know in the comments as always. Until next time, like, comment, subscribe, and climb the steps and ring that bell so you can see my videos. Dawson Rider, signing out.